Welcome to Political Perspectives. I'm Hugo Gurdon, Editor-in-Chief of The Washington Examiner. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel if that's the way you're joining us today, and thank you for joining us. I am joined today by Byron York, Chief Political Correspondent of The Washington Examiner. And Byron, I want to come back to the shutdown, which was the subject that we spoke about last week, because it seems to me that the mood has changed somewhat. It seems to me, last week we were thinking that the Republicans were in a very strong position, that the Democrats are going to get blamed for this, and indeed I think you said that. And that's the way it really seemed. But the Republicans are perhaps playing a strong hand rather badly. There's a little sort of crumbling at the edges about their resistance to extending the subsidies on Obamacare. It means that they don't look like they're really hanging tough on preventing another $450 billion being added to the national debt. You've got Marjorie Taylor Greene, bemoaning the fact that her own children's subsidies will go up. But it seems to me that, not unusually, the Republicans are very bad at their messaging. They look like they might be willing to kind of go along with more spending, and at the same time, they are so they're kind of undermining their own position, and they're not saying, look, the subsidies are just going back to the way they were before COVID, and we're just not going to continue, or we don't think it's a good idea to continue to subsidize people who make up to $500,000 a year. Your take?
Well, I think what we're seeing is Republican message discipline breaking down a little bit, and in a shutdown standoff, message discipline is absolutely critical, and it has to be completely rigid. We've seen Democrats do that and win in the past. So you have this shutdown now. The Democrats want to talk about premium subsidies for Obamacare. And Republicans want to say, we'll talk about that later, but first you have to open the government. You can't be rewarded for shutting down the government. So open up the government and then we'll talk. You have to be absolutely relentless with that message. If you even begin talking about subsidies, oh, maybe we could improve them, or maybe we could extend some of them, or then you're doing the Democrats' game here, and you're going to lose. So the
Right.
message always has to be, look, we're not saying what the position on subsidies is. Fine, we can talk about that later, but you have to open the government first. You cannot be rewarded for shutting down the government. That has been the Democratic line for years and years and years, and it always works with voters who want to see the government opened and then the debate take place.
Right, right. One of the things you mentioned there is the way that the Democrats play these things. And in the past, in past shutdowns, which they have won in terms of where political blame is attached, they have tried to make the shutdowns as painful as possible because they want to put the squeeze on Republicans, assuming that they would get the blame. One of the things and they've tried to do some of the same thing this time. And there's a really good example here of the governor of New York, Hochul, saying that the Statue of Liberty needed to be shut down. It was just shut down as part of the shutdown. But President Trump stepped in and said, no, the Statue of Liberty is essential. We're going to keep it open. Now, in a way, that's about not having something happen which is very high profile, even if not particularly costly, and not having the Republicans get blamed for the pain or the inconvenience of that. But at the same time, and this is what I want to ask you, isn't there a danger when Trump steps in that he turns the shutdown into his shutdown?
Absolutely. I started laughing because I had just talked about how important rigid message discipline is. And, Donald Trump does really not do message discipline.
Right.
Now, we have to say at the beginning that has worked for him. In the big picture, that has worked for him over the years. But it can be difficult for his followers and members of his party. I mean, Trump can come out and say, we must do A, we will never do B. And okay, all the followers say, we must do A, we will never do B. And then a few days later, Trump comes out and says, let's do B. And
Right. Right.
the followers are all out there on that limb. So this is a classic Trump, what you've seen with the Statue of Liberty. And Republicans don't, there's no good way to deal with that because he just is who he is. All the Republicans can do, and their message discipline has broken down among themselves, not just with the president. So all they can do is keep up their own message discipline, and just the president's going to do what he does.
But let's turn to a different subject. The, a fellow called Jay Jones is running in Virginia. He wants to be Attorney General, but it has been revealed that 3 years ago, in texts, one of the most notorious of these texts now suggested that if he had two bullets in a gun, and he were faced with Hitler, Pol Pot, and a political opponent, he'd put both bullets into the political opponent, which is exactly the kind of grotesque endorsing of violence kind of rhetoric that has been given enormous publicity and prominence, particularly since the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I wanted to ask you about the politics of this, because although the Washington Examiner has called on him to have the decency to withdraw from the race, what you find is people like the Democratic candidate for the governor, Spanberger, condemning the comments, but not suggesting that he should withdraw from the race. And it's one of those examples, it seems to me, of the Democrats wanting to have it both ways. Yes, we hate this shouldn't happen, but no, we don't want. And Tim Kaine, another senator, for example, has suggested that he supports it. Virginia senator says he shouldn't withdraw from the race. It gives the impression, doesn't it, that the Democrats, they don't want any real price to be paid if the rhetoric about violence comes from people on their side.
Yeah, and now what he said about the two bullets thing is kind of a black humor that does exist in the world. It's not super rare. I thought what he said about the guy's children was worse,
Right.
but in this political atmosphere, I mean, it seems like it'd be hard to survive. Putting it down in writing, even in a text,
Right.
would be hard to survive,
Yeah.
and especially after the Charlie Kirk thing, when you clearly get kind of a trans rights activist who assassinates Charlie Kirk uh, because of Charlie Kirk's political beliefs. So, we'll see in the election, but we've seen reports today the Democrats have just decided to stay with Jay Jones. And, it doesn't seem that important a thing for them to do this, but they've decided, I assume they decided they can win.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's another example, I guess, of the supposed message discipline and the advantages. If you're all saying the same thing and you make this decision and you stick with it, you can, as it were, tough it out. There's a connected item, or to my mind, it's connected, and that was that just recently the man who identifies as a woman, who 8 years ago, I think it is now, attempted the murder of Brett Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court Justice, was just recently sentenced to 8 years imprisonment for attempted murder. And you probably recall at the time when decision that when the worst barracking of Supreme Court justices was taking place, Chuck Schumer, still now the minority leader in the Senate, was essentially threatening Supreme Court justices, telling them they'd pay the consequences if they made the wrong decisions on important matters of public interest. So again, there's a court decision, a sentencing, where someone just gets 8 years for preparing and attempting to kill a Supreme Court justice. Again, I think people will come to think that there's an enormous gulf between the suggestion that somehow violence is wrong and even when Democrats are kind of promoting it implicitly, and then the punishment that is meted out to someone who is actually convicted.
Yeah, if you read the prosecutor's sentencing memo in the Roski case, I mean, he was loaded for bear, not just to kill Kavanaugh, but he was planning on killing other Supreme Court justices, conservative Republican appointed Supreme Court justices. He wanted to take out the Republican majority on the Supreme Court.
Right.
And now he does, he loses his nerve outside Kavanaugh's house.
Mm-hmm.
But so I suppose that could account for some downward revision in this. But the sentencing memo made it pretty clear. It said, look, you look at all the crimes that this guy has committed, and it's 30 years. So for
Mm-hmm.
the judge to downgrade it so much, take 22 years off of it to an 8-year sentence, because the defendant now says that he is a woman
Mm-hmm.
and that he would be sent to a man's prison, even though he's a trans woman.
Mm-hmm.
It just seemed absolutely crazy,
Yeah.
absolutely crazy, and it's a miscarriage of justice because the defendant in this case deserves to serve longer than just 8 years.
Finally, Byron, I wanted to get your thoughts on it's a media question, really, both with Jay Jones and his extraordinary texts, hoping to see the death of the children of the political opponent, and with the sentencing of this man posing as a woman who wanted to kill Justice Kavanaugh and perhaps other justices. It's reported in the media as being more about the Republican reaction. It's one of those Republicans pounce, or both of them are treated in that way. And it seems to me that what we have, and perhaps have had for a very long time, is news media primarily concerned to depict any Republican legitimate response to extraordinary stories and outcomes in a trial or extraordinary text as being the problem being about the way that Republicans react to it rather than with the substance. It creates a sort of a partisan superficiality in the media, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think if you're at some media organizations, the Republicans pounce thing is just muscle memory. I mean, they've done this forever, and they still do it. And the greatest power of a big media organization is the power to ignore.
Mm.
So when a story comes out, and let's say it has a partisan nature, that is, a Democratic candidate has done something scandalous and the Republicans are yelling about it, the news organization can just ignore it for a while
Mm-hmm.
until the Democrats kind of get their defense together. And then the first story they do is about Republicans attacking, as
Right.
opposed to what the actual story was that started this whole thing. This is a long time uh, practice in the media. And when I say it's muscle memory, it's really true. This has been done in just virtually every case in which a Democrat has gotten in trouble and found himself criticized by Republicans.
Yeah. It's one of those many things which fall into the category of shocking but entirely unsurprising. Anyway, Byron, that's where we'll leave it. And I want to thank you for joining us this week and thank our viewers as well. We will be back again with another issue next week of Political Perspectives.